Take Your Shot podcast, hosted by Josh Gitman. The NBA's hottest takes and debates, storylines from the MVP race to the rookie class, recapping games from the playoffs to the regular season clash. Coming at you Fridays at 5 on Spotify. Are you ready to take your shot?
Welcome to another episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. Of course, as always, I am your wonderful host, Joshua Gitman. And my God, do we have a lot of crazy news in sports this week. Not only the NBA, but the NFL and college football, with Pete Carroll retiring from the Seahawks, Bill Belichick leaving the Patriots, and legendary head coach Nick Saban retiring from Alabama and being replaced by Kalen DeBoer. But enough with football. This is a basketball podcast, and we had so much news, more than I expected this week, that we could not fit it all on the show. So first, I want to shout out the Oklahoma City Thunder for being a half game out of the number one seed. They have been playing amazing. They beat the Heat Wednesday. Then yesterday, they beat the Portland Trail Blazers by 62 points. The Thunder have absolutely been balling out. So shout out to them. But unfortunately, we couldn't fit enough time to talk about them in the show today because we've got a lot to get into. And without further ado, let's get started. Today's rundown will include Ja Morant. He is officially ruled out for the season with an injury. The Bucks have been struggling. What can they do to fix their struggles, and can they fix their struggles? How do I feel about the first and second All-Star voting fan vote returns? Do I agree with the fans? Find out soon. Eric Spoelstra has agreed with an extension with the Miami Heat, and Kawhi Leonard has agreed to an extension with the Los Angeles Clippers. We have a new show on Netflix, Quarterback, but it's NBA version. We'll talk about that a little bit. And to finish it off, we have Trade Deadline Approach, which is a new segment that I'm going to be doing for the next month, which consists of talking about teams in the trade deadlines. It'll probably be consisting of 4 parts, 3 to 4 parts. This first part, I'm going to talk about the sellers. I'm going to give you a rundown. I have 9 to 10 teams for you. I'm going to give you a 2-minute rundown on what they need to do at the trade deadline. And today we are focusing on the sellers. And then, of course, the Take Your Shot top 5 to end it all off. So let's get started. Ja Morant is officially ruled out for the season. The Memphis Grizzlies announced on Monday night that Ja Morant will have season-ending surgery on his right shoulder. In 9 games with the Memphis Grizzlies after his suspension, the Memphis went 6-3, and Ja Morant averaged 25 points per game and 8 assists. The Grizzlies have been a little bit successful lately. They did win 2 straight games after Ja Morant got injured, beating the Phoenix Suns 121-115, and the Dallas Mavericks 120-103. But more unfortunate news just happened. Marcus Smart will be out again for an extended period of time, at least 6 to 8 weeks, with a right index finger injury. Currently, looking at the Memphis Grizzlies, they are 14-23, 13th in the West, 4.5 games out of the play-in, 8 games out of the playoffs, and currently 12.5 games behind the West-leading Minnesota Timberwolves. Memphis Grizzlies are already missing Steven Adams and Brandon Clark for the season, and to me, this is just Marcus Smart now, and Ja Morant's out for the season. It just looks like Memphis isn't going anywhere this season. So what can Memphis do to help its future? I believe that Memphis needs to very highly consider looking into trading Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard. I was working on this part of the show before Marcus Smart got announced the injury. So it will be a little bit harder to trade Marcus Smart, knowing that he won't be healthy coming in immediately. But I do think Marcus Smart will still have value to contenders in the NBA. And I also think Luke Kennard will too. He's a sharp shooter. Very, very impressive shooter that pretty much most years is in the argument for the best three-point shooter, and he leads the NBA in some years at three-point shooting percentage. So it's just a tough situation for Memphis, and I think now you're sitting in a tough position here. You're 13th in the West. You're not close to the play-in, really. 4.5 games, it may seem not that many games, but it is actually a lot of games. So if I'm Memphis, I'm pretty much just going to give up on the season, move to the next season, cash out all the assets you can to your veteran players. Not necessarily saying go to a rebuilding mode, but just saying like for the Marcus Smart, Derrick Rose, who you won't need next year with John Morant probably coming back fully healthy, Luke Kennard, who you don't need because some young players have stepped up, which we will get into a little bit. Those players are really not a necessity for this roster anymore. And I think if you're the Grizzlies, you should cash out, get some picks, whether you use those picks to draft somebody or trade for another star to help John Morant and this young Grizzlies team who cannot seem to have long-term success in the playoffs. And then also, like as I said, the Memphis Grizzlies have a lot of intriguing young guys such as Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, Xavier Tillman. You got Zaire Williams, Vince Williams Jr., who has been playing exceptionally well for Memphis. He just signed a contract for the Memphis Grizzlies. And then also you've got Aldama, John Kochar, David Ronnie. Memphis has a lot of young players that, especially in a season like this where a lot of guys are injured, it would be good to play them, good to develop the young players while trading the other players, especially because Memphis is going to be a luxury tax team when they pay Desmond Bane. So it might be the right move to trade Smart and Kennard and move the young players into the starting lineup and start playing significant minutes. I could see a starting lineup of Memphis and like after the trade deadline as you could see you could see Derrick Rose, you could see Zaire Williams, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, Xavier Tillman. You could even see Memphis trading for a potential young point guard who hasn't really fitted out. Potentially, I could see Memphis trading Luke Kennard to a team like Golden State for a potential Moses Moody to be the backup point guard for John Morant. I could see that happening. Marcus Smart, every contender probably wants Marcus Smart. I think he's just a fit everywhere. So I'm not too concerned about them trading Marcus Smart, but I really do think the Grizzlies need to move on from them because it's very, very difficult. It's a very, very difficult season, especially when you know that this team is probably the best it would have been if John Morant was healthy with Marcus Smart backing him up, with all of the young guys getting better. And it's like you lost in the first round last year to a 7 seed in the Los Angeles Lakers. You beat the Minnesota Timberwolves as the 2 seed again 2 years ago, but you lost to the Golden State Warriors in 6 games. It's just been a very, very tough stretch for Memphis, knowing that this has been the best they've been since the grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies. Mike Conley, Mark Gasol, Zach Randolph. They've been the best since then, and it's just very tough to look at Memphis right now at their roster, knowing that they could have been something this year, could have been the biggest threat to the Denver Nuggets, and now just looking at it, 14-23, going nowhere, injuries everywhere across the table. It's been an absolute disaster for Memphis, and I just do think they need a little bit of a reload, a little bit of a fresh start. So I would cash the assets, work on developing the young players, and worry about what you're going to do next season because there is absolutely no hope for Memphis. I know some people may say there's some hope for Memphis, especially in this Wild West. The Lakers falling. You never know, like teams like Houston, they could go on major losing streaks. The Phoenix Suns, are they going to stay healthy? So there's potential for Memphis to sneak in the play-in, but I just don't really see that happening here, especially that I saw them playing without John Morant at the beginning of the season, and they were an absolute disaster, going like losing a lot of games. They were 3-13 at one point in the season, so it's just been a very, very rough patch for the Memphis Grizzlies, and I feel bad for the Memphis Grizzlies fans because, like, again, yep, you do have the best team. You've been really waiting for this season. This is the season we're finally going to get over the hump, compete with Denver, compete with the Clippers, and it just didn't happen because of injuries. So I feel for Memphis, and it's just a sucky situation for the Grizzlies, but I mean, it's basketball. And I mean, John Morant didn't really help himself with the suspension, so I hope during this time that he's injured, he doesn't do anything stupid. He sits and reflects and he gets right back to the grind and gets right back to being an all-star and an all-NBA player. Sucks for Memphis, but we got to move on from the Grizzlies this season. It's just terrible. But let's move on from the Memphis Grizzlies and let's go to a team that has been struggling a little bit lately. I had this report on them before they played Boston last night, and then they dominated the Boston Celtics at home, even though the Boston Celtics were on a back-to-back. I'm not trying to put an asterisk. It was a nice win. But again, Boston was on a back-to-back. But before the Celtics game, Milwaukee did lose 4 out of their last 5 games. Their only win in the 5 games before the Celtics was to the 5-30 San Antonio Spurs by 2 points in San Antonio. It was a lot closer game. Actually, San Antonio controlled most of that game until the end of the game, so Milwaukee probably should have lost that game. But they did win because they do have Damian Lillard and Giannis, and sometimes, especially with the San Antonio defense, it's that bad, you're probably going to win. And then in the 4 games, I give you some stats. The Milwaukee Bucks gave up over 127 points, one of the largest points given up in a single stretch in NBA history, including a blowout loss to the Jazz, 132-116. They were down 30 at halftime at home to a Utah Jazz team, which is not a great look for head coach Adrian Griffin. The Bucks are also 24th in points per games allowed, above only the Charlotte Hornets, the San Antonio Spurs, the Detroit Pistons, Atlanta Hawks, Indiana Pacers, and Washington Wizards. Though, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks and you're looking at that, that is not a group of teams that I want to be near with. So right now, the Bucks defense is absolutely atrocious, and pretty much, if you want to win a championship, you pretty much got to be top 10 in defense. That's how it works. There's some exceptions, but most of the time, teams who win the NBA title are top 10 in defense, and we know how much this Milwaukee team has major title aspirations after giving up somebody in Drew Holiday who did help you win a title, giving up defense for an offensive juggernaut in Damian Lillard. And then again, more defensive struggles here. The Bucks are allowed 20. They allow the 4th most field goals made per game. They have the 10th worst rebounding team. They force the 2nd least amount of turnovers, and they commit the 4th most fouls in the NBA. It's just absolutely atrocious for the Milwaukee Bucks. And if you're Adrian Griffin, this could be your season. This might be it, because if you got to maximize this team. I know it's tough to be a first-year coach, especially going in a situation like Milwaukee, who is a major contender, and especially losing your lead assistant coach, Terry Slots. I don't know if that was because of you or another conflict, but again, they had to make adjustments to the coaching staff. I know it's a tough situation, but this is the NBA, and especially with Milwaukee, with this franchise player in Giannis, where they want to maximize their winning, you've got all the pressure on you, and Adrian Griffin is not living up to it. He has not done the coaching job that many have expected him to do. He has not coached defense like Mike Budenholzer, because when we do talk about Mike Budenholzer, we do not complain about Mike Budenholzer's defense. He was one of the best, if not the best, defensive schemed head coach in the NBA. Honestly, under Popovich, he really developed that defensive tendency, and he really did a great job on defense with this Milwaukee Bucks team. I know having Drew Holiday helps that for the Milwaukee Bucks, but at the same time, this defense has dramatically changed from last season. And then even Giannis Antetokounmpo is noticing this disinterest after a 112-108 loss to the Houston Rockets. Giannis said nobody's taking pride in their effort on the defensive end. Giannis said every single thing, everybody has to be better. It starts from the equipment manager. He has to wash our clothes better. The bench has to be better. The leaders of this team have to be more vocal. We have to make more shots. We have to defend better. We have to have better energy. We have to be better. We have 4 months to get better, so we shall see. Even Giannis is expressing a little frustration. Now, if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, especially the ones in the front office, I mean, that is a major concern, especially for a once-in-a-generation player, a franchise player that has pretty much committed to you long-term when he probably shouldn't have. is expressing this level of disinterest, there is definitely a problem going to Milwaukee. I know as I said, they had the great win against Boston. They may have just fixed their issues, but at the same point, like the other game, it's just been really, really disconcerting. And I know they have a great record. They really do have a great record. They're 26-12. They're second in the East. They're 3 games behind Boston. They were 4, but obviously the win against Boston makes them a game less behind. So the Milwaukee Bucks haven't even done that bad, but again, Adrian Griffin, there's expectations being in Milwaukee. It doesn't matter if you're the second seed. People in the media like me or ESPN or Fox Sports, they're going to notice your lack of defensive game plan and your lack of team defense. And you really do have to live up to the expectation. If Adrian Griffin doesn't live up to that expectation, like losing in the second round to Philadelphia or Miami or New York or whoever it is, and you're not Adrian Griffin, maybe one and done. Because I feel like Mike Budenholzer being the coach, I know he had some issues, but I didn't believe Mike Budenholzer should have been fired. I know they did lose to the Miami Heat as an 8th seed, and they did lose to the Boston Celtics in 7 games the year before that, when they were up 3-2 in the series, having a home game to close it out, but they lost 2 straight. So I know that's happened, but I didn't really believe Mike Budenholzer should have been fired as the coach. I thought he was an amazing coach. I thought he did a really good job for the Milwaukee Bucks, transforming that defense that once was that lackadaisical defense that Milwaukee had before with Jason Kidd. He really wasn't executing the defense the way the Bucks wanted it to be. And Mike Budenholzer absolutely did that. And the Bucks pretty much have had major success since then. And now, even though they're still having success, because obviously you have Giannis and Dame, 2 of the best players, 2 of the top 75 players of all time in this league, it's just a major, major concern. Because, again, what we always say, defense wins championships. Offense may win you games like Milwaukee's doing right now, 26-12, second in the East. But defense wins championships. Defense wins in the playoffs. Because when you get to playoff time, we're not going to have these 150 to 153 games like we see with the Indiana Pacers and the Atlanta Hawks. We're not going to have these wins where you're going to win 125 to 121 against the San Antonio Spurs or win like 131 to 124 against the Miami Heat. You are going to have to grind it out on the defensive end. And so far this season, we have not seen the Milwaukee Bucks get a true win that was grinded out on the defensive win. I mean, the only win that was dominating to me was Charlotte. They won 130-99. That's the only time they've held a team under 100 points this season, which obviously barely, and it was a blowout anyway. And Charlotte was probably playing their subs at the end, not to discredit the blowout, but you get the point. They're giving up 100 points guaranteed every single game. That's a little bit of a concern here. I mean, I know it's rare to do it, to hold a team under 100, but it is definitely possible, and most NBA teams have done it at least sometimes multiple times this season. So just looking at that state of the Milwaukee Bucks defense, just really not a good sight to see. And I mean, I love Damian Lillard, but we do have to question his defense. I mean, you bring in Damian Lillard for Drew Holiday. I know you're taking the risk, like you didn't get the job done last year, but again, you're taking the risk of losing defense, giving up defense for offense. And so far, even though they've been winning, it really hasn't been working out. I know Drew Holiday hasn't played his best with Boston because obviously Boston's got this super team. They've got 5 great players now. I'm going to include Derek White in that conversation. And Drew Holiday looks like a number 5 guy on this Boston Celtics team when he was a number 3 or potentially number 2 guy with the Milwaukee Bucks. So I know Drew hasn't looked good so far, but when Drew was with Milwaukee, he was playing his best basketball of his career. Even better than the Philadelphia days, way better than the New Orleans days. Drew Holiday was playing his best under Mike Budenholzer's system, and I know you did have a disappointing loss to the Heat. Part of that was Giannis being injured. You got to consider that. So I just didn't understand the major changes for Milwaukee. Because if this doesn't work out, now you don't have any picks. You lost a valuable shooter in Grayson Allen. You've lost Drew Holiday. So if this doesn't work out for Milwaukee, the GM will lose his job. Adrian Griffin will clearly lose his job. And Milwaukee is going to have to start from scratch in their front office, which for a superstar player like Giannis Antetokounmpo, that will not be a pleasant sight for him to see. So this is This is a very concerning path for the Bucks, especially when you know you're going to have to grind it out in the playoffs. If you're playing a team like, let's say Miami or New York in the second round or maybe the first round, who is a very, very good defensive team. I mean, can you actually, and you're giving up so many points, can you actually win the games? Can you win 4 games? I don't think so. If New York and Miami play great defense as they usually do in the postseason, Milwaukee may not win that series because they may not put up enough points compared to the points they're allowing because their defense is absolutely atrocious, and something needs to happen for Milwaukee. Adjustments need to be made very fast because Adrian Griffin's job could potentially be on the line. Moving on, though, we've got all-star fan votes. The first and second rounds have been announced. Not the results, but the voting returns. We've got some interesting names on here, some surprising ones, some snubs. We'll get into all of those. Some who I think should be higher on the list and some who I think should be lower on the list. This will be a quick take here. But just to announce it, the West front court in ascending order from 1 through 10. Descending order, from 1 through 10. We've got LeBron, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, Alfred Şengün, Paul George, Wemby, Holmgren, and Karl Anthony Towns. That is for the West front court. I mean, I feel like Jokic should be number 1, but obviously this is fan vote. This is not the actual vote, and obviously everybody loves LeBron. I do think, though, considering where Holmgren has been, I think you should really consider him as an all-star this rookie year. I know he's technically not a rookie, even though he is considered a rookie because he didn't play a game last year. I would consider Chet Holmgren to be 5th in line behind LeBron, KD, Jokic, Davis, Leonard. I think Holmgren should have a legitimate shot at being an all-star. That's how great he's been playing for the number 1 seed Oklahoma City Thunder. So that's what I don't like there. Moving on to the West guards, we've got Luka at number 1, Steph Curry, SGA, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Edwards, Ja Morant, De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, and Klay Thompson. First of all, why is Klay Thompson on this list? It makes absolutely no sense. Devin Booker, I feel like he should be a little bit higher, but again, you got to consider the fact that he didn't play any games. I feel like De'Aaron Fox should deserve a little more respect from these fans, especially being behind Ja Morant and James Harden. Ja Morant played 9 games this year. James Harden has really not. He's played good sometimes, but he could be an all-star, but I don't think he should be ahead of somebody like De'Aaron Fox, who has sustained success as the best player on a Sacramento Kings team who was up and rising. I believe SGA should be number 1 in the West guards. I believe he should be ahead of Luka Doncic and Steph Curry. SGA has played like the MVP, and I believe SGA, right now, if I had to pick an MVP, I would pick Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's just my opinion, even over Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid. So I would definitely put SGA first. I would leave Doncic and Curry in there. Anthony Edwards deserves to be there, and De'Aaron Fox. Those are my 5 for the guards. Now moving on to the East front court in descending order. We've got Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, Butler, Brown, Porzingis, Bam, Julius Randle, Paolo Banchero, and Mikal Bridges. Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, the usual 3, that's fine. Butler, I do believe Butler, I know he's very popular, especially down here in South Beach, but I don't think he should be 4th. Currently, he hasn't played enough games. He's missed pretty much 9 out of his last 10. He's coming back soon, but Butler really hasn't played enough games this year to me to be an all-star. But I do believe but I feel like his other teammate, Bam Adebayo, has certainly played enough games to be an all-star and certainly has the case to be an all-star. I don't believe he should be ahead of Jaylen Brown, who I don't understand why is in the East front court. I don't understand that at all. And then I feel like he should. I feel like Bam and Porzingis were sort of tied. Julius Randle has had his ups and downs this season. Banchero does deserve all-star consideration. Do I think he may squeak in there? It'll be tough. There'll have to be a tough cut with Jaylen Brown, Porzingis, Bam, and Paolo Banchero. I believe one of those guys will have to go, which is going to be one of the things we talk about, one of the all-star snubs we talk about there. But I feel like it may be one of the Celtics because there's just, you can't have all five of them. Come on. And then the East guards, we've got in a descending order, we've got Tyrese Halliburton, Trae Young, Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, Tyrese Maxey, Jalen Brunson, Derek White, LaMelo Ball, Drew Holiday, and DeMar DeRozan. Halliburton has played amazing. Should be number one. Damian Lillard should be on the list. I don't believe that Trae Young should be as high as he is on the list, second in the guards. I know the East guards are weak compared to the West guards and pretty much all the other categories in this all-star voting process. But the Hawks have played absolutely atrocious this season, and there should be no way that Trae Young should be second. The Hawks are sitting out of the play-in right now as the 11th seed, 15-21, tied with the Brooklyn Nets for that last play-in spot. They have just been absolutely atrocious this season, so I don't believe he should be second. Tyrese Maxey, in my opinion, should be second. It should be Halliburton and Maxey getting the starts. Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, and then Brunson I would put off my bench. Wild card, you could put Trae Young in there maybe. Derek White is also on the list. Props to him. He's been balling out. One of the more underrated players this year. It kills me to say that because Heat fan. He hit the buzzer beater, but Derek White has been balling out, and he looks and has the potential to be an all-star. I don't think he's going to get it because there are too many guards to be considered, but he is definitely playing his best basketball of his career. And then you got Drew Holiday, LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball hasn't played enough. Drew Holiday has, as I said, a less role in Boston than he has in Milwaukee. And DeMar DeRozan, the Bulls, they haven't done so great, but you could put him in there if you want. So far, if I'm going to sum you up my All-Stars, I'm going to give you, in the West, I'll give you 12 players: LeBron, KD, Jokic, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard, and Chet Holmgren. For the West guards, I'll give you Doncic, Curry, Shai Gilgeous, Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, and then I'll put James Harden in there also. For the East, I'll give you Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Bam, and Banchero. I'll cut Porzingis. I know he's had a great season, but there's got to be a cut somewhere. The East guards, I'm going to go with Halliburton, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Damian Lillard, and I would put DeMar DeRozan in there. You could also put Derek White. Either one works for me. I wouldn't mind with either. So those are my All-Stars so far. Obviously, we still have a little bit of more time to go until the All-Star votes are finalized. But for now, those are my All-Stars. But moving on from that, quick take here. Erik Spoelstra has agreed on an 8-year, $120 million contract extension with the Miami Heat. And Erik Spoelstra, just the best coach in the NBA. He started from the video room, worked his way up. Pat Riley gave him the head coaching job in 2008 after he was an assistant coach with him and Stan Van Gundy. Spo has won 2 NBA championships as a head coach. Everybody discredits him a little bit because he had LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Bosh. But it is hard to win a championship no matter what the circumstances are. And Spo has just been overachieving with these Miami Heat teams for years now, and he's pretty much carried the torch for Pat Riley and the Heat culture. So shout out to Erik Spoelstra for the contract extension. Another contract extension we had was Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard has agreed on a 3-year, $152 million extension with the Los Angeles Clippers that will take him through the 26-27 season. The Clippers are also currently in an ongoing conversations to extend Paul George. It was a rough start to the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George era. 2020, they blew a 3-1 lead. 2021, Kawhi Leonard tears his ACL. 2022, Kawhi's pretty much out the whole season. In 2023, Kawhi Leonard gets hurt in the postseason. in his Clippers career so far, in his 4 years in LA, Kawhi has been averaging 24 points per game. But this year has looked the best year for the Clippers in the Kawhi Leonard era. The future is looking bright. They got James Harden. Westbrook is accepting his role off the bench. Everybody's staying healthy. And currently, to me, as I've been saying multiple times, they are the biggest threat to the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference. And the Clippers have really, really surprised a lot of people this year, especially me as a doubter in their ability to stay healthy, but they've done it. So good job to the Clippers. Congrats on Kawhi for getting his money. And hopefully the Clippers maintain their health because it's a very, very good team down there in Southern California. Final quick take here before we get to our trade deadline approach segment. Netflix is making a new NBA show modeled after the NFL show Quarterback, featuring LeBron James, Domantas Sabonis, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, and Jimmy Butler. I think it's pretty cool that the NBA is doing this because I watched the quarterback series with Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota. It was a pretty intriguing series, and I'm actually happy that they're doing this for 5 players, not only 5 players who are all-stars, and 5 interesting players with interesting personalities. LeBron, everybody wants to see LeBron in his daily life. Sabonis is a very nice guy. Anthony Edwards has got a interesting personality, and his daily life would be very interesting, especially for Boston Celtics fans. That Jason Tatum's daily life will be very interesting. And Jimmy Butler, just a wacko, crazy person, and a lot of people will like what he has to bring in that show. So I think it's very exciting that Netflix is doing this. I'm excited. I'll watch every single episode. So I think it's pretty cool that they're doing that. And I really like the quarterback show. So I hope and I expect this to be as good as that was. So shout out to Netflix for making the NBA life, giving us an insight on the NBA as a player and what their daily lives are. So shout out to Netflix, shout out for the NBA for having this partnership with this series. Finally, we're moving on to our new segment for the next few weeks, the trade deadline approach. And this week we will be focusing on the sellers. I have 9 teams for you that I believe should be sellers at the trade deadline. Not necessarily all of them are teams that haven't really had maintained success, but some of them, just don't assume they're all on the bottom. There's some teams on the bottom stage that I do not have as sellers. So most of them are bottom teams, but don't assume that all of them are I'm not giving you every single bottom team. That's what I'm trying to say here. But let's start. I'll give you a 2-minute rundown for each NBA team, what they need to do at the trade deadline, and who they need to acquire, what they need to send out. Okay, let's start with the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls, obviously, they have been pretty much 500 for the past few seasons. They're currently sitting at 18-21, ninth in the Eastern Conference. This team has been absolutely average for the past few seasons. You have DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Alex Caruso, Nikola Vucevic. All of them should be on the trade block, and I expect all of them to be traded for the Chicago Bulls by the end of the trade deadline. This team is not going anywhere. There's no way that Chicago can possibly get any other stars in the trade deadline. Chicago's pretty much going to be at this average pace. So I think they do need to trade DeMar DeRozan, try to get a first-round pick out of him, try to get a first-round pick out of Zach LaVine, try to get a first-round pick out of Vucevic, and try to get some assets for Alex Caruso. And not only just the picks for Chicago. I would like to see Chicago get young assets, new starting small forward, new starting shooting guard, new starting power forward, new starting center. I think Chicago needs to clean the house. I think they need to have a new fresh team. I think they need to do exactly what Brooklyn did last year and what Orlando did with Vucevic, with Aaron Gordon, with Evan Fournier a few years ago. They just need to absolutely clean the house, start over, and finally focus on a rebuild, because enough is enough of being 500 for Chicago, because they are absolutely going nowhere. They're just a play-in team. And nobody's really scared of Chicago doing anything in the play-in tournament. That matter, even if they get out of the play-in tournament, the playoffs. So Chicago's got to pick a direction, and the only right direction for the Chicago Bulls' future is to finally get to that rebuild and move on from DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. Next team for you, I got the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards are currently sitting at 6-31. They are the third worst team in basketball. The second worst team in basketball, behind obviously Detroit basketball. They are 22 and a half games out of first place, 14th in the Eastern Conference. They have, obviously, their star players include Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma, Tyus Jones. I believe they should trade Tyus Jones to a contender. I believe some contender that's desperate. I've heard reports that the Miami Heat could potentially get in on the Tyus Jones conversation. If you can get a first-round pick from one of those teams that want Tyus Jones, I think that would be very beneficial and give DeLon Wright a chance to start. I think you should also give Johnny Davis a chance to start for the Washington Wizards. Jordan Poole, I mean, he has to stay. He's the young asset. He can stay, work on his game in Washington. But I also think Kyle Kuzma needs to go. Corey Kispert needs to start. Kyle Kuzma should be traded to a contender or a team that is looking to buy for young assets. I like the Sacramento Kings for Kyle Kuzma. I could see a Davion Mitchell package surrounding Kyle Kuzma. You could get Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, move them, flip them in a 3-team trade, or just let them walk in free agency, save some money, and sign some deals. I could definitely see that. I would like Davion Mitchell for this Washington Wizards team, giving him that chance to finally start after being benched for the Sacramento Kings, especially if the Wizards move on from Tyus Jones. I think the Wizards do need to clean house on their good assets. Also, Danilo Gallinari, someone who I did not mention, he is coming off an Achilles injury, and he was supposed to play with Boston, but he never got to play with Boston, and he got traded with Washington in the deal that sent Porzingis, obviously, Boston, Marcus Smart to Memphis. So I think they need to clean house with Danilo Gallinari as well. Send him to a contending team. Again, just the Wizards got why are the Wizards holding on to Kyle Kuzma, Tyus Jones, and Gallinari when you can get young assets and accelerate that rebuild? Not accelerate that rebuild, but continue on the rebuild, get more picks, and please, Washington, if you're 6-31, what's the point of holding on to Kyle Kuzma? Come on, Washington. Moving on, we've got the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets, I believe, what they need to do is trade Terry Rozier. I believe they need to give LaMelo the full reins. I know this LaMelo Terry thing, they have done quite relatively decent job with each other, but I just think if you're Charlotte and looking at your future, you should give LaMelo Ball the reins at point guard. I also believe they should trade Gordon Hayward and Miles Bridges. Gordon Hayward, because he's making so much money, he could be good use on a contending team. I guarantee you a team will give you a young asset for Gordon Hayward. Miles Bridges, he didn't even sign the qualifying offer with Charlotte, and he signed the qualifying offer, with Charlotte. He did sign it, and he will be a free agent next year, and there's been multiple reports that Miles Bridges will not be returning with the Charlotte Hornets, so I believe they should trade him. Nick Richards is also here. I think you can keep him. Mark Williams, I believe, should stay. He is the future starting center, but I believe the Hornets should be starting PJ Washington with LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller there, and potentially trade for another small forward for Gordon Hayward, get another nice young asset there. Terry Rozier, again, trade to a contender for a nice young asset. I could see, again, trades to teams that desperately need point guards. You could see it with the Phoenix Suns. You could see it with, again, the Miami Heat. They need a point guard as well. If you can get a young asset from one of those teams or any other contending team, quite frankly, that would be good for the Charlotte Hornets, especially a small forward, because if you do trade Gordon Hayward, you're going to need someone, because Cody Martin is not your future starting small forward. Next, we've got the Detroit Pistons, the worst team currently in the National Basketball Association. The Detroit Pistons are 3-35. They're 26 games from first place. They're 13 games from the play-in. Currently sitting on the roster, obviously, Cade Cunningham, who is carrying the team. You've got Jaden Ivey, Bojan Bogdanovic, Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren. But the two players who I'm looking to see for a potential trade is Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks. I know teams, there's been reports that Bojan could go for potentially 2 first-round picks. So if you're the Pistons, why not cash that out? Alec Burks, you don't necessarily need him, especially since Marcus Sasser is behind Alec Burks, and I believe Marcus Sasser should be given more of an opportunity to play on Detroit, because when Marcus Sasser has played for the Pistons, he hasn't actually been that bad. He's been one of the decent players on this Detroit Pistons team that have actually seen. Asar Thompson should be starting. I don't understand why Bojan Bogdanovic is on the team, especially when you drafted Asar with the 5th pick. I believe a 5th pick on a rebuilding team should be starting. So your Bojan is just holding Asar Thompson back. and you can get assets for him. So I don't understand why they're holding on to him. And again, Alec Burks, I believe, is holding back Marcus Sasser. So I think if you give those guys time for development and you get more young players, maybe not necessarily young players, but expiring veteran contracts and some first round picks that you can hold on to draft more young players, I think that's the best approach for the Pistons at this current state of time. So if you're a contending team and you're willing to give up the picks, I think Detroit should absolutely jump on that right there. Moving on to the next team, we have the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz are currently in the NBA standings. They've at 11th in the Western Conference, 19 and 20, actually a game ahead of the Golden State Warriors at 17 and 20. They are actually tied with the Lakers for that final spot in the play-in. They've won 8 out of their last 10 games, so they have been on a little bit of a hot streak, but at the same point, I do not think it will be a sustained hot streak, and I believe the Utah Jazz should move on from some players, potentially even Lauri Markkanen, because I feel like the Jazz are too good right now. They're playing too good with their current roster at this state of time, especially when you're a rebuilding team. You have all those first-round picks. But at the same point, you could keep Lauri Markkanen because obviously what the Thunder did building around Shea, even though he was very, very good and was only helping the Thunder win rather than lose. Obviously, look at them now, pretty much the first seed in the Western Conference. John Collins hasn't done it for the Utah Jazz, but nobody wants him. If you're the Jazz, I would trade Jordan Clarkson to free up, and Kelly Olynyk to free up minutes for Keontae George. Taylor Hendricks, I believe, should get some more minutes. Walker Kessler should get more minutes with Kelly Olynyk gone. Abaji should get more minutes. Again, freeing up the minutes for the young guys, developing the young guys. Because how do you think the Thunder developed Lou Dort, developed Josh Giddey, developed Jalen Williams? They freed up minutes for those young guys and traded all their veteran players and to get more picks and more young guys. So if you free up the minutes for the young guys, I think Taylor Hendricks has a lot of potential, but he hasn't played at all this season. And I think Abaji, if you give him some more minutes, he's a very solid defender. And obviously Walker Kessler, we saw it last year. He had an amazing rookie campaign. So I don't understand why he is not starting for this Utah Jazz team at this current state of time. So if I was Utah, I would try to get rid of Kelly Olynyk and I would try to get rid of Jordan Clarkson. Probably keep Markkanen, but if a team comes with the right offer, I would definitely put that on the table. The Toronto Raptors are my next NBA franchise. They are currently 15 and 23 in the Eastern Conference. That puts you at 12th place, a game behind the Brooklyn Nets and the Atlanta Hawks for that final spot in the play-in tournament. Obviously, we know the Raptors just traded OG Anunoby to the Toronto Raptors for Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett and a Pistons second-round pick. And then they also sent Precious Achiuwa and Malachi Flynn. Obviously, it looks like Pascal Siakam will be next. We don't know where. We thought Sacramento could have been a potential destination, but that fell through after reports that Pascal wouldn't sign with the Kings long term after he was traded there. But obviously, if you're already committed to trading OG Anunoby, there's absolutely no reason in hell that Pascal Siakam should be on this roster past the trade deadline. So you should obviously trade him. Gary Trent is another intriguing name that could be traded, especially for contenders who could use a nice shooting guard who can shoot the ball efficiently and can play defense. A nice 3-and-D guy there in Trent for potential young players. I mean, Dennis Schroeder could be on the trading block as well, even though they did sign him to be that starting point guard. Obviously, now they have Emmanuel Quickley. Dennis Schroeder is playing less, and he would be more of purpose for a contending team in getting younger assets. So the only players I could see really trading other than Siakam or Schroeder and Gary Trent. But the number one priority for the Raptors at this trade deadline is to find a way to get rid of Pascal Siakam, because if you don't trade him, he will leave for absolutely nothing, and you will get nothing for an all-star in Pascal Siakam. So again, number one priority, trade Pascal Siakam, but look around, shop the market for Gary Trent Jr. and Dennis Schroeder as well. Next team we've got for you, we've got the Atlanta Hawks, currently sitting at 11th in the East, tied for the Nets at 15 and 21 for the final play-in spot. The Atlanta Hawks have had a really rough season. Obviously, they have been 500 for pretty much eternity now. They have gone nowhere. They've been the 7 or the 8 seed, and they've got first rounded. Obviously, 2021, they had that good season, making the Eastern Conference Finals, upsetting the Sixers, getting the 5 seed, beating the Knicks in the first round, pushing the Bucks to 6 games. That was an interesting season for the Atlanta Hawks, but obviously, we've seen nothing like that. Coaches have gone away from Lloyd Pierce. Now Nate McMillan's gone. Everyone's talking about Quinn Snyder should get fired now. Atlanta has been reporting that Trae Young and Jalen Johnson will be the players built around, and DeJounte Murray is on the trade block. Obviously, this Young and Murray trade hasn't really worked out. They gave up 3 first-round picks, the Atlanta Hawks, for just to move up 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. I mean, it's not really worth it there at all. So if you were the Hawks, I would definitely consider moving DeJounte Murray. But at the same point, if all these lineups are not working, you're building around Trae Young, everything's not working, I would consider moving Trae Young if I'm the Atlanta Hawks because it hasn't worked out. You cannot build around Trae Young. He could potentially be a number 2 on a championship contending team, but I don't think he's a number 1. Obviously they're not going to do it, but it's an intriguing thing to look out for in the offseason, especially if Atlanta continues this downhill path. Obviously, Jalen Johnson could stay, but Atlanta put everybody on the table. I think DeAndre Hunter should stay as well. You could potentially trade Bogdan Bogdanovic. Obviously, Atlanta has a high-powered offense and a god-awful defense. You could trade that for some defense off the bench. Saddiq Bey hasn't really been the defender that we thought he was going to be. And also, if you're Atlanta, I would also trade Clint Capella as well. Give Onyeka Okongwu the starting center role. It's finally time. Trade Clint Capella for a center. Look at the trade Bogdanovic. But the one move I would probably prioritize, I would say, is trading Clint Capella, giving Okongwu the center, and getting a defensive guy who can help this Atlanta Hawks defense and get them back in the conversation to be in the playoffs, or get some young assets and just completely get rid of Clint Capella. I would just sell Clint Capella for nothing. If I had to choose of contending for the playoffs or getting picks, I would just choose getting picks and just giving Okongwu the start and not messing up anything else on the roster. Yeah, we have to see where this goes. I give it a little more time because I know this Hawks team has a decent roster, so just give it a little more time. I would keep everything the way it is. They may trade Murray. I don't think they should, but I would definitely trade Clint Capella. Second to last team here, we've got the Brooklyn Nets for you. Brooklyn Nets should absolutely be selling. The first name I look to is Spencer Dinwiddie. You should be playing Cam Thomas at the starting point guard role. I know he is not the best defender, but he is scoring at a ridiculous rate for a role player. He should be given that opportunity to start because I guarantee you he will average at least 20 points per game starting for that Brooklyn Nets team. Mikal Bridges, obviously, you're building around. Unless the right offer comes, you get 4 or 5 first-round picks, then I would do it. But other than that, no. I think Dorian Finney-Smith and Dinwiddie are the two, and Royce O'Neal should be put up on the table. Nick Claxton, Mikal Bridges, and I think Cam Thomas should be the players that Brooklyn should look at to build around. Spencer Dinwiddie, you can get you can get a nice young starting point guard for Spencer Dinwiddie. You can get more first-round picks. Dorian Finney-Smith, you can get another young player and then start either Royce O'Neal or somebody, or potentially a guy you get back in the trade. If I'm Brooklyn, I would pick one to trade Finney-Smith or Royce O'Neal. I would pick one of them to trade. The other you can just keep for now. So, but Brooklyn is in that same situation as Atlanta. Never really, it's not going to be too bad, but it's not going to be great either. So I think they're going to have to choose a direction, and I think the first thing to do is to start loading picks and build around Mikal Bridges, Cam Thomas, and Nick Claxton. Last team we've got for you today, the Portland Trail Blazers. The Portland Trail Blazers have had an absolutely disastrous season, especially yesterday. They lost to the Oklahoma City Thunder by 62 points. It's just been an absolute disaster for this Portland Trail Blazers team. Scoot Henderson hasn't lived up to his third pick expectations. They do have Tormani Camara, who they got in the trade with DeAndre Ayton. He's been a nice asset, but Ayton has just been blunt. Jeremy Grant needs to go. I don't understand why. If you know you're trading Damian Lillard, you're signing him on a contract. It makes absolutely no sense to me. Why would you give him a 5-year contract when you know you're heading toward this rebuilding direction? Also, you've got Malcolm Brogdon. Why are you holding him? You're just giving less minutes to Scoot and Anthony Simons and Shady and Sharp. So I would trade Malcolm Brogdon. I would look to trade Jeremy Grant, get all the assets you possibly can. I'd give another year for DeAndre Ayton before I would trade him. Keep him. Give him one more season. If not, I would trade DeAndre Ayton. But for now, at this trade deadline, I would look to trade Brogdon and Jeremy Grant to get as much young assets and picks as they can possibly get at this trade deadline. And that's my trade deadline approach, part 1 for the sellers. Look next for the do-nothings. I'll probably do the do-nothings next week. We'll see. We've got still the do-nothings left to do. We've got the buyers, and we've got the go-all-ins. There's a difference. We're separating the categories. But I would say the sellers is probably my biggest category. I'm going to go more in depth on the buyers and the teams that need to go all in. But I hope you like the series. If you don't, please comment. But I hope we can move the series along by the trade deadline. And also, speaking of trade deadline, when the trade deadline does happen on February the 8th, I will have a special episode on the day of the trade deadline, giving you all the updates necessary and giving you my opinions on every single trade that happened at the trade deadline. So we will have that on the trade deadline. I'm not going to leave you hanging until Friday. I'm going to give it to you on the day of, right there. Breaking news for the Take Your Shot podcast. Live episode on Thursday at the trade deadline. We'll do it live for you here at the Take Your Shot podcast. But finally, we have the Take Your Shot top 5. This week we have Denver on the list twice, but we'll first start with a team that's never been on the list and probably should not be on the list at all. The Detroit Pistons are hosting the Houston Rockets. I'm only doing it because it's the Thompson twin game. They have one in Houston, but I feel like the more interesting one is Detroit because Detroit has a better shot to win. But I'm still going to go with the Houston Rockets here. Houston has pretty much been average. Udoka has, though, improved the defense significantly for the Houston Rockets, as they're sitting at 18-18, currently 9th, 3.5 games out of the playoffs, half a game out to the 11th seed and 7.5 games to the 1 seed in Minnesota. Obviously, they should beat the Pistons. Honestly, anybody should beat the Pistons these days. God, the Pistons. They may be the worst team of all time. We'll have to just wait and see if that's actually possible, but they're on pace. They're on pace. That's all I got to say. They are definitely on pace to be the worst NBA team in the history of basketball. But obviously, Rockets, easy choice. Next, 4th game. This has always been an intriguing one. We had a buzzer beater in this game last year, and we have this series I really like. The Dallas Mavericks at the Los Angeles Lakers. They're playing in, obviously, as I said, LA. There was a buzzer beater. Davis Bertans had a buzzer beater for the Mavericks last year against the Lakers. Obviously, you got Kyrie Irving versus LeBron. You got Luka versus LeBron. You've got this new interesting young center here that I really like in Derek Lively against Anthony Davis. And the Lakers, I mean, they did have the good win against the Clippers, but they've been struggling lately. They've had their struggles. They've had some disappointing losses, like one to the Memphis Grizzlies. They have continued losing. They had an 18-point loss at home last night to the Phoenix Suns. They barely beat the Raptors the other day. They barely beat the Clippers. Even so, other than those 2 wins against the Raptors and the Clippers, they've lost 5 out of 7 except for those 2 wins, and it's just been an absolute mess for the Los Angeles Lakers ever since the the in-season tournament has concluded, as they have lost 11 out of their last 16 games, so not looking good for the Lakers. Mavericks, they just got to stay healthy. They had a good season when Irving and Doncic were healthy and out there. If they stay healthy, I believe they will be a top 5 team in the Western Conference, and I'm going to go with the Mavs considering the Lakers' struggles. Number 3, we've got the defending champs playing against a team who should have been in the finals but did not make the finals, the Boston Celtics. Boston hasn't lost at home, but they have a test against the champs. It's the undefeated team at home against the defending champions, Jokic versus Porzingis. We'll see how Porzingis plays against Joker. We've got Jamal Murray against the defense of Drew Holiday and Derek White. We've got Aaron Gordon guarded by Tatum. Aaron Gordon will take the assignment of Jason Tatum, so we'll see how he does on defense. It'll be a very intriguing matchup. But again, Boston has not lost at home this season, and I don't expect them to also. So I'm going to go with the Boston Celtics here at TD Garden. Number 2, we've got a team that I really want to talk about, the Oklahoma City Thunder. They are playing a very red-hot team in the Los Angeles Clippers. Both teams, are red-hot. The Oklahoma City Thunder are closing in on the Minnesota Timberwolves for that number 1 seed, currently tied with them at 26-11 for that number 1 seed. They have just been playing absolutely amazing, but now they go on the road. They have a true test against the Los Angeles Clippers. They have beaten a lot of teams on the road, very impressive wins, especially one against Denver, in Denver, where they blew the Nuggets out. I thought that was probably their most impressive win of the season. But again, another test, another threat in the Western Conference that could potentially be in the Thunder's path of reaching the NBA Finals. That's even crazy to say, talking about the Thunder in the NBA Finals. But it is a team in their way, the Los Angeles Clippers. It is in LA. The Thunder have won a lot, and the Clippers have won a lot. But currently, just because the Clippers are at home, and because I think they have the better roster, I'm going to go with the Clippers, but wouldn't be surprised if the Thunder won. And the number 1 game, it's a team that we already said. It's the Denver Nuggets. Also on the road again. They're probably on an Eastern Conference road trip. They are playing the Philadelphia 76ers in Philadelphia. We know the matchup. It's Jokic. It's Embiid. It's premium NBA basketball right there. 2 of my top 3 MVP candidates so far this season. 2 of the top 3 NBA candidates of everybody so far this NBA season. We love that matchup. We love to see it every year. It will be the most competitive matchup, and also another underrated matchup, Jamal Murray versus Tyrese Maxey. That's not half that bad matchup either. It should be a very, very interesting game there in Philadelphia. Philadelphia has had its struggles recently, have lost 3 out of their last 5, and I'm assuming Embiid is when that game comes this week, he will be just coming back from his knee injury, and he's probably at a disadvantage there being hurt. And I think Jokic will win this matchup in Philadelphia today in that game. And I'm going to go with the Denver Nuggets there. I also can't see them losing to both Philadelphia and Boston. So I'm going to go with the Denver Nuggets. Currently, we're sitting at 30-30, 500. So hopefully we can get over 500 for the first time in a few weeks. And that is all I got for you on today's show. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, please follow on Spotify, Take Your Shot, and on Instagram at take_your_shot_podcast_. That's at take_your_shot_podcast_. And tell me how you would have taken your shot on these takes. That's all my shots for the week. See you next time. And enjoy this message from Lonzo Ball.
What's up? This is Lonzo Ball, and you're watching the Take Your Shot podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe to each episode for the best NBA takes.